There are moments in life when strength is not loud, not boastful, not even visible. It is quiet, anchored in the soul, rooted in the depths of experience. And when someone who seeks power over others encounters such a strength born not from ego but from inner resilience, they are threatened. Narcissists, in particular, are drawn to dominance, manipulation, and control. But when they see that they can no longer bend you, deceive you, or make you doubt yourself, their mask begins to slip, and just before they lose all grip, they'll reach for one final, dirty trick. Not because you're weak, but because your power has finally disturbed their illusion. There is a specific point in time when the narcissist begins to lose their grip, a moment so subtle and yet so profound that it shifts the entire dynamic of the relationship they once controlled. And it doesn't happen with confrontation nor with anger, but with a quiet and steady awakening within you, the kind that makes you see their manipulation not as power but as desperation, not as confidence but as a hollow echo begging to be filled. And when this awakening occurs, the narcissist senses it before you even speak it aloud. They feel the energy of detachment in your presence. They notice your gaze no longer searches for their approval. Your words no longer bend to their narrative, and your emotions no longer depend on their reaction. It is a loss of control that terrifies them, because it was never really love or affection they sought. It was always domination through confusion, praise wrapped in poison, criticism disguised as care, and you used to dance around these fragments hoping to find truth between the lies, but now you've stopped dancing, and they are left in a silence they cannot manipulate, a quiet they cannot tolerate, and it is then, when they sense your strength has become rooted in something they cannot reach, that they begin to unravel, because the narcissist's power has never been real. It has always been borrowed from the parts of you that doubted yourself, the parts of you that needed their validation to feel worthy. And when those parts begin to heal, when those wounds no longer bleed for attention, they have nothing left to control, nothing left to twist, and the mask they wear begins to crack, no longer supported by your participation in the illusion. And the more you reclaim yourself, the more their world begins to collapse inward. For a narcissist does not know how to exist without an audience, and you, once a loyal witness to their performance, are now no longer watching, no longer reacting, no longer needing to be seen through their eyes. And this is where their panic begins to grow. They might not show it at first. They may still wear the calm mask. They may still speak with the tone of false superiority. But inside, they are in chaos, because they see you becoming untouchable, not because you've hardened, but because you've awakened to your own truth. And this is the greatest threat to someone who lives off illusion, that you now carry clarity, and you are not trying to save them, not trying to change them, not trying to explain yourself anymore. And the balance of power is shattered when the supply no longer supplies, when the source of energy they once drained no longer leaks, and that strength, your quiet, unwavering presence, becomes the very thing that exposes everything they fear, because they have spent their entire existence avoiding themselves, avoiding truth, avoiding reflection. And now you, by simply standing in your own light, reflect back the emptiness they cannot escape. And that is why they begin to plot. That is why they begin to prepare one final act, because losing control is not something they can accept, not because they love you, not because they care, but because control is all they've ever known, and your strength has broken the cycle. Your strength has become the mirror they cannot bear to face, and that realization, that quiet, unshakable knowing in you, marks the end of their reign and the beginning of your return to self. When the narcissist realizes that they can no longer control you through charm, guilt, or fear, when they sense that your mind has become your own, and your heart no longer responds to their emotional bait, they shift strategies with a precision that feels almost rehearsed, because this final tactic is not one born in the moment. It is something they have crafted over time, stored away as a last resort for the rare situation in which their usual methods no longer hold weight. And that tactic is the inversion of truth, a psychological sleight of hand so cunning that it causes even the most grounded individuals to question themselves, because it doesn't come as a blatant lie. No, it comes in layers, twisted versions of real events, subtle distortions of your words, careful rephrasing of your intentions until even you wonder if maybe you are the problem. And this is the dirty trick, because it relies not on power but on confusion. It doesn't attack your body, it attacks your sense of self. And the narcissist plays this card with such convincing emotion, such rehearsed pain, that others might believe them, that even you, after all you've endured, may begin to waver. Because this trick is meant to disorient, it's meant to destabilize the foundation of clarity you've worked so hard to build, and it often starts when they begin to tell mutual acquaintances, family, or friends a version of the story where they are the wounded one, the betrayed one, the misunderstood victim, and you, once the source of their praise, are now painted as cruel, selfish, cold, or unstable. And this is not accidental. It is a deliberate character assassination designed to isolate you, to make you feel unseen, unheard, and discredited before you've even spoken your truth. And they do this because they know what you value. They know that you hold integrity, honesty, and fairness close to your identity, and so they aim there, right where it will hurt most, because if they can't make you feel small with their presence, they'll try to make you question your own reflection. And this is why it's so insidious, because you might try to explain, you might try to set the record straight, to defend your name, but in doing so, you re-enter the web they've spun. You start to play their game again, and that's all they want, not to win with facts, but to wear you down with doubt. And the more energy you spend unraveling the lies, the less energy you have for your own healing, your own truth. And this tactic becomes a trap not of chains but of perception, one that relies on your reaction to maintain its power. And the narcissist knows that if they can't hurt you anymore, they can still haunt you through the eyes of others. They can still pollute your space with the residue of suspicion. And what's more cruel is that they will often accuse you of the very things they themselves have done. They will project their deceit onto you, their cruelty, their manipulation, and because they are skilled at wearing the mask, at sounding sincere, their lies become difficult to separate from reality, especially when your heart is still tender from the battles you fought alone. And so the trick works not by being believed universally, but by being believed just enough to make you feel betrayed, just enough to make you question who sees the truth and who doesn't. And in that space of uncertainty, the narcissist hopes to reclaim their grip, not over your actions, but over your peace of mind. And this is why their final trick is not about the past. It's about the future. It's about making sure that even as you walk away, you carry their distortion with you, that even as you reclaim your strength, you question the reality that gave birth to it, because a narcissist doesn't just want to break you. They want to break your version of the truth so thoroughly that you never trust it again. When the narcissist realizes that their lies no longer manipulate you, when their false affection no longer lures you back, and when their attempts to control you are met with unwavering silence instead of emotional reaction, they resort to one last move, a desperate invitation to chaos, one designed not to win you back with sincerity or truth, but to drag you back into their storm with provocation, confusion, and emotional sabotage. Because they understand that your strength has shifted the power dynamic, not because you've become louder or more aggressive, but because you've stopped engaging on their terms. And this is what truly terrifies them, that you've chosen indifference over involvement, peace over performance, clarity over confusion. And this is when they will begin pushing buttons they know are connected to your deepest fears and unresolved wounds. They will bring up your past, weaponize your vulnerabilities, and twist your words to make you feel responsible for everything they caused, not because they believe it, but because they know your empathy still lingers, even after all the harm they've caused. They hope that empathy will make you defend yourself, make you try to clarify, to restore understanding, to clear your name, but in doing so you are being baited back into the emotional labyrinth they built for you, a place where logic doesn't matter, where your pain is dismissed, and where the truth is buried beneath layers of manipulation. And every time you respond, every time you try to correct their lies, you lose a piece of the inner calm you've started to build, because this invitation to chaos is not meant to resolve anything. It's meant to keep you entangled in the trauma bond, a psychological tether where pain is mistaken for love, and conflict becomes the only form of connection, and they know exactly how to keep that bond alive, not with kindness or change, but with provocation, with accusations that come out of nowhere, with sudden acts of cruelty followed by silence, with words that stab like daggers coated in concern, and just when you think you've found your footing, they pull the rug from beneath you with another unpredictable outburst, and the pattern begins again unless you recognize it for what it is. A final, frantic attempt to reclaim control by destabilizing your reality, by making your calm feel like coldness, your strength feel like cruelty, your detachment feel like betrayal, and if you're not prepared, you might fall for the illusion that you are the one who changed, that you are now being heartless or unkind, but in truth, you are finally seeing through the game, finally choosing not to engage in battles that only leave you bleeding, and this is what disarms them more than anything, that you are no longer accessible through pain, that your wounds no longer make you reach for them, and so they create chaos not to resolve the past, but to prevent you from fully stepping into your future because they fear what you will become without them, fear the person you are when they no longer have the power to define you, and this fear drives them to provoke, to agitate, to tempt you into the fire one last time, hoping that the old patterns will resurface, hoping that you will abandon your healing to rejoin the familiar dance of dysfunction. But the true test of your strength is not how loudly you resist them, it is how peacefully you refuse to participate, how gracefully you walk away without a single explanation, without needing to prove anything, without needing last word, because they expect a fight, they crave your reaction, but your silence, your calm, your refusal to re-enter the chaos becomes your final act of freedom, the moment they realize that the spell is broken, and the power they once had over you no longer lives in you, no longer moves you, no longer matters. There comes a moment when the dust has settled, when the noise of their chaos no longer echoes in your mind, and in that stillness you are faced with a choice, whether to keep carrying the weight of their narrative or to finally return to your own center, because the narcissist's final dirty trick was never just about making others see you differently. It was about making you see yourself through their distorted lens. It was about infecting your inner voice so thoroughly that even in solitude, you question your worth, your intentions, your memories. But when you begin to pull those threads apart, when you begin to differentiate between who you are and who they told you you were, a quiet clarity begins to form, and with that clarity comes the return of inner authority, a state not of arrogance or defiance but of grounded knowing, where your truth no longer requires explanation, your boundaries no longer need permission, and your decisions are no longer filtered through the fear of how others will react, because you understand now that true power was never about dominance or control. It was always about alignment with the self, and this is what the narcissist was always afraid of, not your anger or your resistance, but your self-possession, your ability to walk away without looking back, to choose peace over performance, to value solitude over toxic connection. And it is in this space that you begin to rebuild not just your life but your identity, not as someone who survived them, but as someone who has outgrown their reach. And this is not an easy path, because they will still try to haunt your name, they will still try to provoke you through silence, through smear, through projection, but each time you choose not to respond, not to react, not to re-enter the script they've written for you, you reclaim another piece of your power, and the more you embody that truth, the more invisible they become, because their tactics rely on your participation, on your confusion, on your emotional investment. And when that no longer exists, when you become neutral and detached and deeply rooted in who you are, their influence begins to collapse from within, and it is here that healing begins to accelerate, not because they've stopped trying, but because you've stopped giving them access, and slowly you begin to remember who you were before the distortion. You begin to trust your intuition again, to make decisions without second. guessing, to speak without fear of misinterpretation, and that inner authority becomes your compass, guiding you not away from others but back to yourself, back to the voice that was silenced under manipulation, back to boundaries that were blurred under guilt, back to the clarity that was clouded by projection. And from this place, you no longer seek validation from those who cannot see you. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, because your worth is no longer up for debate, and your peace is no longer for negotiation. And in this state of reclaimed power, the narcissist's final dirty trick dissolves, not because it wasn't cunning, not because it didn't hurt, but because it can no longer reach the version of you that now exists, the one who has transcended the need for approval, the one who has seen behind the mask and chosen not to wear one of your own. And it is this return to self, this quiet reclamation of soul, that marks the true end of their influence and the true beginning of your liberation. There is a sacred moment when you realize that you are no longer afraid, not of being misunderstood, not of being alone, not of being painted as someone you are not. And in that moment, you transcend the narcissist's reach. You become more than a survivor. You become a mirror they can no longer look into, because your strength reveals their absence of self. When a narcissist tries their last trick, let it fail, not by reaction, but by your refusal to descend. Let them shout into silence. Let them throw shadows against the light. And above all, walk forward, unapologetically, because true strength never battles. It simply endures.